Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to the ZP Sense It All webinar. So we like to do this webinar sort of once a month, and it's really just highlighting Sense It All and really a passionate ZP to, how can I put this, to sort of help translate science out of academia and essentially into the real world. So this won't be one of those webinars where actually we do a lot of talk. I've literally, I mean, it sounds a little bit dramatic, but I've literally eliminated all slides from this because you can go to many places and you can hear many talks and it's all sort of, pre-prepared, etc. But in fact, what I want to do today is really just dive in and do a webinar all around the science theory, show in practice how to actually translate academic research or research in general, could be out of a startup as well, into real products. So rather than me, as you can see, I've got the Sense It All in front of me. What I'll do shortly is start doing some demonstrations, and as I do those demonstrations, I'll talk about essentially a philosophy at Zimmer and Peacock in translation. So what I have now is I'll change cameras, show you what I've got in front of me, and we'll go quite quickly, but it's not because I want to rush, it's because I want to kind of get as much put in as possible. So what I want to say is, first of all, what I have in front of me is a SenseItAll Potentiostat. SenseItAll Potentiostat is the only instrument, I would say, in the world that's been designed with electrochemistry in mind, not for the sake of doing electrochemical experiments. It will do electrochemical experiments, but it's actually designed to genuinely get people over the final hurdle and actually get them onto the market with real products. You can see all sorts of things floating around in here. Balances, the SenseItAll Potentiostat. Out of shot, I've got some vortex or a blender. So you'll see all of this come into play shortly. First thing I'm going to do is say, first thing I'm going to say is this. All right. So here I am in my development lab, in my academic lab, and I want to just develop electrochemical assays. And that's completely fine. So what I'll do is I'm just going to reach behind me. I'll grab a 50 microliter pipette, and I will do a kind of classical electrochemical experiment. So here goes. I walk up, I take a vial of redox active material. I put it onto my beautiful screen printed electrode. This is one of the world's most reproducible screen printed electrodes in terms of, from electrode to electrode, there's a high degree of consistency. Why? Because Zimmer and Peacock, we manufacture these screen printed electrodes so that actually we can make real world assays out of them, not so that we can just, do science that's otherwise not going to reach the light of day. But Zimmer and Peacock, everything is about reaching the light of day. We want everything out of the lab and in the world of hands of real people. So what I've got there then is a drop on that sensor. I've got my instrument in cyclic voltammetry mode, or at least the app is. I'm just going to give this a quick name, and then I will run it. So I'll just put ferry cyanide. Whoops, misspelled that. And I'll put 101 in on that. All right, so we're good. I think that's good to go. Go continue. I'll just do a few more settings with this just to kind of, and I think that will essentially do me. Right. So what this is now doing is in real time now, I've programmed the SenseItAll app, and I'm doing a sort of a classical electrochemical experiment. I'm actually doing cyclic voltammetry. What you're looking at here is timeline, and you can see the current coming with time. Now, I know that with people who do cyclic voltammetry, they often show current versus voltage. Just out of interest, current versus voltage, when you're looking at cyclic voltammetry, is actually an abstraction, because what you're scanning obviously is voltage, but you're scanning that voltage in time. Now what it's come to now, it said upload complete. So now I want to go to whoops a daisy. I want to go to the next part of this and actually talk about what does upload complete mean. So I'll just change. I'm just going to share my screen for you for 1 second. So we come up to here. I'll go to here. I'll go to reports. Yeah, in fact, I want to come back here. I'm just going to put in the word demo. This is one of the settings that I put when I was into the app, and that's the instrument that I was using. And there's my ferricyanide 101. This is already a breakthrough because, in fact, you never have to ask the question, where's my data? Because with this instrument, the data is really up in the cloud. Now, what have I got going on here? I've got a classic cyclic voltammetry. It's on ferricyanide, and the only slightly remarkable thing is that there was no laptop involved in gathering that data. I was actually just using my phone, which is in Bluetooth connection with the SenseItAll Potentiostat. So it already feels like a sort of 2025 experience. By the way, you can run this off a iPhone or an Android phone. And then we've got data up in the cloud. Great. Okay. So what should we do next? Well, let's turn this into a real number, let's say. This is the power of this. So much software that you have in the electrochemistry world is all about the gathering of data, but nobody's at least commercially giving much thought to actually the post-processing of data. So let's turn this data into actually something useful. Now, admittedly, this is just, a sort of standard, solution in electrochemistry of just ferricyanide. But let's go and find that peak height. Let's kind of guess that peak, not guess, it's about 350 millivolts. Is about, let's put a little window around this. I just want to show you what I've actually just done there. So I've just done that. I've said, let's go and find the peak height. And it's opened up a window at 350 millivolts with a width of 100 millivolts. And it's found the peak up here. Okay, that's great. So let's try something else now. Let's just go tools. Let's show extracted value. Okay, so let's have a little look what that looks like. And now what it said is, okay, so my peak height is 15 and my concentration is 0.164 millimolar. Well, what we would do now is obviously gather a real calibration curve, but with a sensitivity or gradient and an offset. And we would turn that number essentially into a real value. I just want to try some numbers for a second. Let me just put 0 and just have a quick look at what this looks like. What I'm doing here is I'm guessing at some calibration factors for this, and I can see I've guessed wrong because I've come far too high. So let me just put actually what I'll do is I'm just going to put 5 in for a second. Just give me 1 second. Yeah, so I got pretty close. Let me just try something else for a second. I'll try and get in there. 3.75 closed off. Yeah, so now I've come up to 4 millimolar. I'm just going to try one last thing. Once I've got this essentially tuned in, I can save it as a template, and then I have an assay. Now it's a bit of a jokey assay, but I have an assay which 4.3. Maybe I'll try one more shot at this. I bet I'll try 3.1. I know what'll happen if I have a quick look. Yeah, I got pretty close that time. Maybe I should have been brave and just gone for 3. So I will try it and then we'll call it quits. Otherwise, this will become the Martin Tunes. Oh, there we are, 5.026. Now, what this means is right. Okay, so I took the instrument, the SenseItAll. I put a known concentration of ferricyanide on there, which in my particular case was 5 millimolar. And I gathered classical cyclic voltammetry with the instrument. But what changed was I actually sent the data to the cloud. And I really like the fact that this is not a PC-based piece of software. This is a cloud-based piece of software. So I can then start manipulating the data through these tools and actually turn it into concentration. And now I can send it back to the phone if I so wish. Just saving it, by the way. I can send that back to the phone. This is closing the final gap that many people are doing electrochemical biosensor development and electrochemical assay development. And when you read their papers, there will be raw signal and there may be a calibration curve. But what they're not able to do then is say, and by the way, I was able to take this new assay that I developed and this new sense that I developed, and I was able to put it into the real world and people were able to actually use it. The reason they can't actually use it is because most of the people that you would be interested in using it, be a doctor, be a nurse, be an environmentalist, be a food technologist, they can, but they don't want to because they've got their day jobs to get on with. They can't take your raw signal, look at the peak height, and then say, oh, okay, well, due to that peak height, therefore I've got this much concentration. But this system will actually just automate that process for them. So I just want to kind of give you now, what I'll do now is I'll just stop sharing that for a second and give you a little bit more of an insight as to this as a potentiostat. So you can see where I'm going with this. I've obviously got a few other samples in front of me, so this won't all be, and it won't, not all of it you may have seen before. I've got this Red Bull in front of me. This won't be because I would like drinking Red Bull, but that'll be featuring shortly as well. What I want to do is I just want to scan a few more codes. So square wave voltammetry, great technique for people doing immunoassays or aptamers. Cyclic voltammetry, good technique for small molecules. Linear sweep voltammetry, good technique for small molecules. Impedance spectroscopy, good one for binding assays. Open circuit potentiometry, good for ion sensitive electrodes, and amperometry, good one for like enzyme sensors. So I'll just do a quick enzyme sensor type. I'll just call this amp so I can find it easily. Go continue. Just start. I may put that to 100 and just start. So it's very easy to go between all these different methodologies, and it's not, again, you instantly get this feeling that this is not like a kind of classical potentiostat where you've got drop down menus and stuff like that. No, I'm using QR codes, and these QR codes are very powerful because users can generate their own QR codes and actually start generating their own assays. So let that come to completion. It will go upload complete. The data will go to the cloud, and then we'll move on to some real world applications. So again, upload complete. You were seeing the data in real time earlier on. I'll share my screen with you for a second. Let's go up to reports. You understand the robustness of a technology like this. That in fact, it's all cloud enabled. There's my data, amperometry. And then we get a classic kind of Cottrell response in the cloud as well. And I can also go in there and sort of start analyzing this if I so wished as well. So I can find a sort of peak height. We'll look at 45 seconds with a window of 10, and we can start the whole process. Oh, in fact, I missed it because my assay was only 30 seconds. So no wonder it's clever. It threw me a few errors. So I'll put that 25. Actually, I'll do that 20. Let's see what it does now. Yeah, and there we are. And then it's sort of, because it's, yeah, and it's found the highest point within that window, which happens to be here. So what I'll now do is I'll stop sharing that window for a second because I'll go back to here. See my hand, but don't worry, I am actually still here. But I will just share what's in front of me. As I said, I just not going to do slides this afternoon because I think it's better to talk and show. So the next thing I'm going to do is actually show you now that we can translate into real world applications really quickly. So what I'll do is I've got this QR code reader on here. I'm going to bring in this new QR code. And now I'm into a new mode, which says caffeine low. I'll bring in a real world sample. And just to demonstrate that this generally is the real thing. And what I'm going to do is I will just grab a tube. Now, you'll see me, what I really like about electrochemistry is, or the way we try to do it, at least our assays, is to make them simple, fast, doesn't take necessarily a lot of training. And, it's the more you give an operator to do, then the more mistakes they'll actually make. So what I'll do is I'm just going to do, I'll take one volume of the Red Bull, and I'll take, just going to put it, I'll take one volume of Red Bull, and I'll take one volume of the buffer. So one, in it goes, throw away this pipette tip, grab another one, and I'll put in another volume. Right. So those two volumes have gone together. 1 + 1 = 2. It is a real world sample. I'll give it a quick shake up. And I might ask you a question you may not know the answer to. If you're the manufacturer of, let's say, Red Bull, or any kind of energy drink, Monster, etc., even Coke, Coca-Cola, how do you guarantee that actually you're controlling, active ingredients like caffeine in that drink? The quick answer is, there are methodologies around, but I can absolutely assure you that one of the powers of electrochemistry is what it's very good at is actually making easy to use assays that don't necessarily require a lot of processing. So what I'll now do, I will add the sample to the sensor. You'll hear me say the word 50 microliters quite a lot. Just find that 50 microliters with the kind of electrode size that we have often actually covers the sensor quite nicely. So I will take the sample, put it on the sensor, which I've done. I'm just going to change the name so I can find this easily later on. So I'll put Red Bull. And this is live, so I'll put the word live in there. I'm ready to go on that. I'll go continue. I've followed the instructions fine, and off it goes. Just out of interest, this is actually now doing square wave voltammetry. So I do get this kind of, I can see the raw signal appearing. Now, I don't ask real world food technologists to necessarily understand that raw signal, but it does give them a visual feedback that something's happening, that they, the instrument's not just kind of gone wrong. This is such a robust assay. And what it says here is 0.259 milligrams per gram. So for every sort of gram or milliliter of Red Bull, there's 0. And if I round that up, that's 0.3 milligrams per gram. We just get it's such a robust assay because in fact in Red Bull, if you read the side of the can, it'll say, I think I've calculated it, so I'm just going to read it quickly so I can find it. Yeah, 0.03% caffeine in it, but 0.03% caffeine is actually 0.3 milligrams per gram of caffeine in the Red Bull. So we've done that. Now what I want to do is I just want to show you really quickly that the data is up in the cloud. So I go here. You can appreciate that the way this is set up, if you're sort of supporting external people, and science only becomes useful once it leaves the lab and actually gets into the hands of, let's say, real users. We've got an amazing way of actually sending assays out of our lab. Somebody could be using them. They can ring us up, let's say, and say, maybe they ring them up. I don't think anyone rings anyone anymore, but they can drop us a line and we can find out. So here I've got the square wave voltammetry. I can see the caffeine peak. I can see how well our system has actually picked up the caffeine. You can see here that we've got quite sophisticated ways of doing baseline adjustment. So we've brought that baseline right down to 0 so that we can truly measure the peak height of that caffeine peak. And then it's sort of reported that we've got 0.259 milligrams per gram in there. And if I look in here under properties, I can see that we've done some pre-processing where we've done a baseline correction using an iterative polynomial. And I've just used the default values. I've told it what the calibration factor is. I've told it what, I told it where to find the peak height. And I've told it what calibration to fit to. It knows that the dilution was 2 because I added 1 volume plus 1 volume. So it's actually back calculated the whole sample and given me the caffeine in the original sample rather than in the diluted sample. So let me just do a quick summary so far. So far we have done cyclic voltammetry on some ferricyanide, and I did it because I wanted to show you that this is a real potentiostat. We also did some amperometry on that ferricyanide just very quickly, again, just to demonstrate this is a real potentiostat, but I changed nothing on the potentiostat. I just gave it a QR code and actually turned it into a genuine caffeine sensor. Now, what that caffeine QR code did is it said, okay, potentiostat, I want you to run this square wave voltammetry. And when you run that square wave voltammetry, upload the data to Julie, run it through a particular configuration of the data pipe, calculate what the caffeine concentration was in there. And in that particular case, it was the peak height was about 17 microamps, and therefore using the calibration factors we had up there, that comes back at 0.3 milligrams per gram, which is really spot on for what the actually manufacturer does. And that was, again, square wave voltammetry. We've finished the last step that everyone doesn't finish, which is, here's my square wave voltammetry, here's my scientific paper, but by the way, it never left my lab because I couldn't help people engage with my assay properly. But this software is the only software that actually, or this cloud system completes the loop and sends back a value to my phone, which is the same values on the cloud. So you can see that that data pipe that we have in the cloud is really doing a good job at completing that. So what I'll now do is I'll go on to show you a really tough sample type. I might pull a few things out of the way so that it gets a little bit busy, as you could appreciate in doing live demonstrations like this. I'll take that sensor away. I'll pull this guy out of the shot for a second because I just want to bring in this guy. Right. Okay. So what I have here is I have a couple of chilies. I just want to kind of demonstrate to you that, this is what I'm up to. So you may have seen something like this before, but you won't have seen one that's quite so complicated, if I could say. So I'm going to take my chilies. I'll put them within these guys. I'll put them in there. Whoops, daisy. Yeah, shut that down. I will start coughing on this one. It's my own fault for the way the setup I've got, but it will make me cough. But understand that at ZP, and hopefully we can inspire others to do this as well. So I've taken my 2 chilies. I want to know how much capsaicin. I'm going to start coughing. I'm going to have to close that up for a second. I want to, well, in fact, I have to measure now. So what I'm going to do is I'll turn my balance on and I'll do everything live for you. But I think sometimes people try to perfect assays, and I don't know what a perfect assay looks like. But I think they spend a lot of time kind of talking about why their assay can't be commercialized or can't be sent out there. What I've actually just done is just weighed out 51 milligrams, which is that what I want? No, I want 100 milligrams. So let me just put a bit more onto this weighing paper. $81, getting close. 87, 96. So I'm 4 milligrams off my 100 milligram target. So I'll essentially take that for the sake of a live demonstration. I also want to close this up before I start coughing. Right. So what I'll now do is demonstrate to you why electrochemistry is one of the most powerful sciences in the world. It's an ugly sample. It's a real sample. You can imagine this being soil. You can imagine this being some sort of pharmaceutical. But it's not a nice laboratory type sample. But I need to turn this sample into something that I can actually analyze. So I've got my tube here. And I haven't done too bad a job of getting most of it into this actual tube. I might, I might just try getting this last bit in here. And if it sticks, then I will not bother. Right. So what I'm going to now do is I've got my real world sample. I've got it into my tube. Electrochemistry, at least in the way we do like electrochemistry, we do like to work in the liquid state. And of course, at the moment, I've got some genuine, fairly fresh red pepper, so it's not in the liquid state. But what I'll do is I will just take 900 microliters of buffer. I will put it onto my sensor, sorry, onto my sample, which I've just done. I'll close this lid up, bring it back into shot. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring a thing, my vortexer in, just to give you a kind of sense of how you can do assay development. I'll vortex this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Now I'm going to get to about 30 seconds. Now the reason I'm vortexing is the vortex is just so good, as you can appreciate, at actually shaking this kind of sample. 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. Right, so I've got my sample there. I'll bring my sensor back in. That's not my sensor, my SenseItAll back in. I will take a chili sensor, which I will now do. I will click that into place. You're going to hear me say use that magic 50 microliters in a minute. But again, I'm just going to show you the power of this as this essentially what is a potentiostat. Now I've just scanned another QR code and actually come into essentially my chili mode. I'll just give this a name. So I'll call it chili. It's 1 in 10. So that was the dilution. I think that'll be enough to identify that later on. So I've got my food sense. Sorry, I've got my SenseItAll. I've got my app in communication with that. I'll just grab, as again, 50 microliters of sample. I'll pipette it onto the sensor, and we should be somewhat good to go. So let me do that. Right, I've done it. And I will pull this out just so we kind of got a bit more space. And I think I can hit continue. I'll make sure I choose the 1 in 10 dilution. And off we go. And I can see the data being gathered in real time. I can see this is doing cyclic voltammetry. And we've got an answer of 3,050 Scoville heat units. Now, some people say, well, that's very low for a chili, but people don't really appreciate that when people are reporting the Scoville heat units of chilies online, what's being reported is the dry weight. So in fact, if you want to know what the dry Scoville heat unit of this chili is, I can assume that it's 90% water. So a quick back of the envelope calculation says times that by 10, which brings me up to 30,000 Scoville heat units. And that's then, so when people are sort of trading chilies and they say, oh, well, I expect that chili to be 10,000, 20,000, 100,000. What they're reporting there is the dry, when it's all desiccated, because this is a fresh sample of chili, and therefore it's full of actual water. So it's the wet weight Scoville heat unit that we're actually reporting there. What I want to do is just want to take you back to the screen over here, because I got the results, but it also says if we just go to here, reports, just do a quick refresh here, and there it is, chili 1 in 10. So I'll click on that, and you've got some beautiful cyclic voltammetry. So what we have is a peak 1, a peak 2, and a peak 3. These are the kind of classics of capsaicin. Same technique I was using earlier on, where we actually have told the software, go and look for that peak. So in fact, what we're doing is we're actually analyzing this peak here. Go and find that peak, find its peak height, and then using the calibration factors that we've put into the cloud, turn that then into Scoville heat units. And so we're not leaving people hanging with the raw data. We actually give them a very simple user experience, which is, here's the result on the phone. Same result that's actually in the cloud. But I think something that this makes this a very modern instrument, because we now have the cloud, we can actually give people the raw signal. And you understand in a medical application where you're talking about patients, absolutely understand that you would not want to be giving them raw signal for their glucose signal or their sodium or their potassium. That's I don't want to say too much information, but it really is too much information. You have to take care of that for them. But you can understand that actually in an industrial application or a food production application, it's good to actually have the raw signal, because so many times in life you just get this number and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, that must be true. Really? Is it true? But with this, we actually have a way of being able to demonstrate to people that actually, we've got this raw signal. It gets from that we extract the Scoville heating in this particular case, and it's all sort of saved for them. And just out of interest, there's also a nice little feature here that we can actually export this, so you could appreciate that. If it's being used as part of a quality system, people often want a record of things. We've absolutely got it saved up in the cloud. All the time, the date, who did the work is all saved up here. You can see it's me. It's this time in the afternoon, so you can see that it's live, the raw signal and the number as well. So that's much more traceable than just a raw signal, or rather just a number. So I think with that, then what I'll do is I will sort of summarize by saying, okay, what I've demonstrated to you this afternoon is really is a potentiostat. So it's really intended to say, okay, go into the lab, do your experiments, do your assay, do your paper. But just understand, because of this data pipe that we have available, if you make a new biosensor or make a new assay, you don't have to finish with an amperometric signal or an EIS signal or an OCP signal or a square wave signal or a CV signal or a linear sweep voltammetry signal. No, we can actually, as long as you do some calibration experiments where you try the assay or the sensor with different calibrations, and as long as you do that, and therefore we can figure out what your gradient for the calibration is and what your offset is, as long as that's all figured out, then actually we can turn the raw signal into, in the first instance, we would measure it and get like a peak height, for example, and then actually using the calibration, turn it into a number and send it back to the phone. So suddenly the data, or the result, the system rather, is actually leaving the lab. So if you do have any questions regarding SenseItAll, and this really is a new type of potentiostat, I would say don't hesitate to reach out to us. I do appreciate you coming. I know you were kind enough to reach out to us. So if you've got any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Okay, thanks very much.